the OPM email that came out later in the day that seems to now indicate people are supposed to respond to this email. They say to further clarify, response to email sent on Saturday is voluntary but strongly encouraged. Once again, you should not transmit any confidential or sensitive, privileged, or investigative information. Please send your bullets to this email. Going forward, I've asked the office to operationalize this exercise, so please stay tuned for instructions in the future. OPM may consider incorporating an expectation that employees submit weekly accomplishment bullets into its regular weekly reporting structure because, you know, having to send in 5 bullshit bullets every week is certainly going to improve government efficiency. Again, thank you for your dedication to our agency's mission. So they're saying here they're going to operationalize this exercise moving forward. And then we've got one other piece here from Elon. He says, subject to the discretion of the president, they will be given another chance, referring to employees who did not respond. Failure to respond a second time will result in termination. So anyway, kind of indications all over the place. Trump backs up Elon, then the Office of Personnel Management says, no, you don't have to respond. Elon says you're going to have to, you get one more chance. Then OPM comes in and says, well, it's not mandatory right now, but we're going to operationalize this. So that's basically where things are.
Yeah, I have a theory now of Elon blowback, which I was trying to tease out to you yesterday.
Okay,
is
lay it on
boss theory. Is that the more Elon is seen as a dickhead boss, as opposed to a visionary entrepreneur, the more Americans will turn against him. So the vast majority of Americans are not like us. They're not self-employed. You know, they don't own their own business, and that's fine. It's a pain in the ass you know, for the people who want to know what it's like out there. They work for W-2 or they have a boss, right? Or they or are the boss, having been subject to somebody's authority previously. You and I previously have worked office jobs, so you know intimately what it's like to have a literal moron trying to performance review you or tell you what you can and can't do differently in some sort of like HR software that rates you 1 out of 4. It's both dehumanizing and also incredibly stupid at the same time. But the stakes are so high because your salary is on the line. And so I believe that the more Elon is seen as a capricious and an annoying boss over the vast majority of, or over the largest employer in the United States, and the more that people have a connection to that employer, there will be more pushback against that. Now, part of the reason why most Americans had not really cared about it previously is, you know, at the end of the day, the private institutions like Tesla or SpaceX, you have a choice of whether you want to work there or not. You're also incredibly well compensated, and it's not like worldly important that you work in your job, which at least some government jobs are. But I think that the more publicity that there's a spotlight on this type of behavior, that Americans really don't like to be screwed with by their boss. I remember reading a statistic, it's like 70% of people like hate their boss, or they were just like 20-some% of people would literally like kill their boss if they had, or say they would if they could.
Wow.
People really hate their boss. I get it. You know, it's one of those where I've been in that position before where they're so annoying. And so I think that the more that this permeates to people, it will really start to piss people off. Because if you think about it, white collar, service based, everybody knows what it's like to have an annoying supervisor, or to be scheduled, or to be told one thing and then told the opposite. I mean, how often does that happen when you work in a workplace? It's maddening.
And white collar employees get treated way more humanely, and I mean like literally like human beings, than blue collar workers who, you know, are completely dehumanized, often like searched, subject to these ridiculous security procedures, and surveilled even while they're in the break room eating their lunch and all that sort of crap. And so, yeah, everybody hates bosses. Everybody hates bosses.
People really hate
so I think you're right about that. And I think Elon is leaning hard into the asshole boss persona. So when you couple that with the fact that, you know, these federal government jobs, I was telling Sagar before the show, one of the states that has the highest proportion of federal government workers is actually Alaska. Like, people think of federal government workers being here in D.C. They, by and large, are not. I mean, there are many here in D.C. This is obviously the greatest concentration of them. But they're spread out across the country, and their impact is felt across the country. And then you think about, like, the ancillary workers and just the... You know, anytime you have this level of like glee and delight in firing people and destroying their lives and their livelihood, it's gonna rub people the wrong way. So I think we are starting to see that pushback. You know, what's gonna happen with this frickin' Elon bullet point situation? I don't really know. And it is an interesting subplot to see, and one thing I didn't anticipate is the possibility that the agency heads themselves could be somewhat of a check on Elon, because they got their Senate confirmations, they went through the thing, they thought they were getting this level of power and agency within these departments, and then they're watching Elon just completely Bigfoot them, even to the point of like, well, I get to say who works for you and who does what and how this whole thing is run, and I'm gonna get access to all your data, and my little like goofy 20-year-olds are gonna come in and run wild through your agency whenever the hell they feel like it, whether you want them there or not. And so while the congressional Republicans, because of the politics around it, will just bend the knee to Trump and Elon has threatened them with primary challenges, and that's an important enforcement mechanism, et cetera. It's a little bit different dynamic with these agency heads. So it is a particular dynamic that I want to watch, and I think is a little bit unsettled as of now in terms of how all of that is going to play out. There was yesterday an interesting protest, I guess you would say, at the Department of Housing and Urban Development. We can put this up on the screen. Somebody hacked into the screens in the building and played this AI-generated video of Elon having his
Trump
like feet kissed
Elon's
by.
toes.
Yeah, it's kind of disturbing to see.
You should put a trigger warning on this.
To be honest with you, and then across the screen it reads, "Long live the real king." Of course, a reference to the position of power Elon has taken, and also Trump's previous reference last week to "Long live the king" in the context of the New York congestion pricing situation. So that is something that happened that was confirmed by multiple reporters, including Jeff Stein, as I said. There's also a few developments in terms of the legal battles against Doge. We can put this next one up on the screen. So the federal ethics watchdog that Trump has been blocked from firing by a federal court has ruled that some of the terminations of probationary employees appear to be illegal. So Trump tried to fire this dude. A court said you can't do that, or at least there's a temporary injunction put in on that. And so he has said that according to, and this is not a court ruling, to be clear, from Hampton Dellinger, this is just, he's the federal ethics watchdog. He's advising that some of these probationary employee firings may be illegal. You also had, we don't have an element for this, but yesterday you had a judge that really harshly questioned the constitutionality of the entire setup of Doge. And part of this saga comes down to, you guys remember the Trump administration put in this court filing like, Elon, he has nothing to do with Doge. Like, he's not in charge of Doge. He's just an advisor to the president. But then when this judge was questioning them, okay, well then who is in charge of Doge? They couldn't answer. They had no idea. And the reason that this is important in terms of its potential constitutionality is there's something called the Appointments Clause, which means if you have a significant position, it has to be confirmed by the Senate. That's why the government is trying to say like, oh, Elon doesn't have anything to do with that, because obviously he's not confirmed by the Senate. And so the fact that they're this far into the administration and they're pretending Elon's not in charge when like clearly he is, number one, and number two, they can't say who the acting director of Doge is when it obviously has been given these incredible whole of government powers. That's why this judge was questioning whether or not this whole situation was constitutional at all.
Yeah, it's very interesting in terms of how this will continue in the court process. But for me, I am just still mystified at this whole OPM situation, because it does really get to a crux of, who, not only who's in charge, but to what extent they will have authority going forward under their own department. And if Elon can just parachute in, and outside of some programs, like, is he going to be able to run the so-called day-to-day? I mean, I guess the thing is with Trump, and again, I think this is the thing about Trump as well. Trump is also a boss, right? Trump is also somebody who probably empathizes with this idea, like, oh, my employees are stealing from me, or, they're taking advantage of me. And so now that he runs the government, he probably empathizes with that, sending such an email. But this, like I said, I think it's starting to flirt with people who are feeling jerked around. Because that's where I think most people can, again, empathize with the chaotic nature of all of this. And if there was a plan and there were going to be cuts, I think a lot of people would be fine with it, but, or at least Trump MAGA folks would be, not necessarily liberal ones. But the idea that your job is in jeopardy or not, and all of these legal theories, and you have to send this email or not, it detracts from the idea that there's like a steady hand and competence on the wheel, which, if you think about it, that was the pitch that Donald